It was freezing that morning, and Noah's hands were numb from the cold wind as he left the shelter without breakfast. His stomach growled, but he forced a smile. He had a job interview today, his one shot after months of rejection. Dressed in a second-hand shirt, he clutched a plastic folder tight like it was gold. Inside was his resume, wrinkled but hopeful. As he hurried down the alley near the metro station, he noticed a woman sitting alone, barefoot and shaking. Her face was hidden beneath a hoodie, her hands purple from cold, and a torn bag lay beside her. Noah slowed down, torn between compassion and urgency. He was already late, but something about her felt fragile. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. She didn't respond, just shivered harder, looking up with eyes that held pain and silence. He offered his scarf, the only warm thing he owned, and wrapped it around her gently. She whispered, "They took everything. I don't know where to go." Noah didn't ask questions. He pulled out the little cash he had, enough for food, and pressed it into her hand. Then he walked her to the nearest cafe, gave the barista his last coins, and made sure she had somewhere warm to sit. By the time he glanced at his watch again, the interview was over. His shot was gone, just like that, but he didn't regret it. He turned back to check on the woman, but she had disappeared. That night, he sat alone on the shelter bench, watching the city lights blur through his tears. "Maybe I'm just not meant to make it," he whispered to himself, feeling invisible to the world, but miles away in a luxury penthouse. That same woman stared at Noah's scarf on her lap, with tears streaming down her cheeks. She opened her laptop, typed his name into a search bar, and whispered, "He has no idea who I am." But he just changed everything. Because she wasn't just anyone, she was Amelia Crest, the reclusive tech CEO who hadn't been seen in public for months. And the next morning, the world around Noah was about to shift in a way no one could have imagined. Noah had no father growing up, just an old photo and stories his mother used to tell with a bittersweet smile. She worked double shifts as a cleaner, always smelling of bleach, with cracked hands and tired eyes, yet she'd hug him, tight every night, whispering, "Even when we have nothing, we still have kindness." From childhood, Noah learned to give without expecting, offering his lunch to a classmate even when he was hungry. He'd fix broken toys for other kids at the shelter, using tape and string, smiling like it was a masterpiece. He never demanded attention, never asked for more. His soul was quiet, gentle, almost too soft for this world. When his mother passed away from an untreated infection because they couldn't afford the clinic, he didn't cry in public. Instead, he sat by her grave every evening for weeks, reading her favorite poetry out, loud under the fading sunset. People said, "He's strong." But inside, Noah's heart had folded in silence, stitched only by memories and hope. He didn't blame the world. He didn't scream or hate. He just kept moving, believing that someday the world would be kinder in return. When others laughed at his frayed shoes, he chuckled too, saying they were vintage. When job panels overlooked him for flashier resumes, he still thanked them with sincerity. He never begged, never cursed his luck, just kept trying, even when doors stayed shut. The day he met Amelia, he didn't know she was a billionaire. He saw a cold, scared woman, and all he thought was, "She needs help more than I need a job." That was Noah's heart. So innocent it didn't calculate gain or loss. Even when he gave away his last dollars, he smiled. Even when she didn't thank him, he didn't feel owed. He helped and walked away, like a quiet guardian angel passing through. That level of selflessness is rare. so rare that it shook Amelia to her core, because she'd built an empire but forgotten the warmth of human kindness. Noah reminded her of something she thought the world had lost, and that's when sympathy turned into responsibility, because Amelia couldn't let someone like Noah be buried by the system. She had the power to change his story, and she had already decided, Noah is the kind of soul the world needs more of, and I'm going to make sure the world sees him. Amelia Crest had built her empire with steel nerves and zero tolerance for weakness. She was hailed as a genius, a tech prodigy, but behind the headlines, her soul had grown hollow. In boardrooms, she was feared. On magazine covers, she smiled. But in the mirror, she saw nothing. She once believed compassion made you vulnerable. So, she buried hers under deadlines, contracts, and numbers. Her world was algorithms and acquisitions, never moments or memories. But Noah's scarf, that simple act of warmth, shattered her steel armor. It reminded her of the girl she used to be, once lost in the system, once starving too. She remembered rainy nights under park benches, holding her baby brother's hand, whispering, "We'll survive." She hadn't felt that in years. Now, with that scarf pressed to her face, she couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. She saw herself in Noah, and it hurt. How did I forget where I came from? She whispered in the dark of her penthouse. All her luxury, her wealth, her power, it had distanced her from the pain she once vowed to end. But Noah's kindness, so uncalculated, so raw, it reached the parts of her soul that still remembered. She opened Noah's file on her screen. No degree, no connections, a resume typed from a library computer. But his references glowed. Honest, humble. Works till his fingers bleed. Gives even when he has nothing. She thought of the executives she'd fired for greed, the partners she'd cut off for betrayal. And here was Noah, pure-hearted, jobless, but more of a leader than most millionaires. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. She called her legal team, her assistants, her media consultants. Clear my schedule. I need to see someone. Now. That night, Amelia didn't sleep. She watched interviews of struggling youths, read essays on poverty cycles, scrolled forums where dreamers begged for chances, and she whispered, "We don't need more CEOs. We need more Noahs." This wasn't about charity. It wasn't guilt. It was a moral reckoning, because for once Amelia saw that power without purpose was empty. She made a decision, one that would shock her board, the media, the industry. She would rebuild her company's mission, starting with one name, Noah Ellis, because he didn't just deserve help. The world deserved what he carried inside him. Noah stood outside the building, holding a folder with worn edges, eyes filled with quiet defeat. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and the last of his coins went to pay for bus fare, just to be rejected again. Still, he didn't curse his luck. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "I tried, Mom. I really tried." Behind him, black cars began lining the street, sleek, silent, guarded. The wind shifted. People stared. Something was happening. And then the impossible. The tower's golden doors opened wide, and out stepped Amelia. Noah blinked. His mind struggled to believe it was the same woman from that alley. She wore power like a crown, flanked by advisors and security. But her eyes searched only for him. She walked fast, heels clicking like a drumbeat of destiny, and stopped right in front of him. "Noah Ellis," she said, her voice steady but heavy with something deeper. "I made a mistake. I walked away from someone I shouldn't have." He didn't know what to say. He looked around, confused, nervous. unsure if this was a prank. But then she did the unthinkable. Amelia reached into her purse and pulled out the same scarf he'd wrapped around her that day. She held it to her chest like it was worth more than diamonds, whispering, "This changed everything." Noah's lips parted, but no words came out. The people watching faded. The noise disappeared. All he could see was the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "You gave me warmth," she said, voice cracking, "when you had nothing. You saw me when I felt invisible." She held out a folder, her personal letterhead on the cover. "I want to offer you a position, not just a job, a future, a path to everything you've earned but never received." Noah's knees buckled, slightly. His hands shook as he took the folder. Inside was an offer beyond his dreams: salary, benefits, mentorship, access to Amelia herself. But what struck him most wasn't the money. It was the handwritten note at the bottom. "You reminded me who I used to be. Thank you for saving me. Amelia." That was the moment Noah broke. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming grace of being seen. For the first time in years, he cried, not silently but fully, freely, shamelessly, and Amelia didn't look away. She stepped forward and hugged him, tight, real, without any cameras or scripts. That was the moment everything changed, for both of them. Noah never told her what he gave up that day. He never mentioned the job interview he missed, the one he'd waited 4 months for. He just handed her his scarf, walked her to safety, and disappeared into the cold like nothing mattered more. He never explained how he'd spent nights preparing for that one chance, how he'd ironed his shirt at a laundromat using the restroom dryer, or how he'd skipped meals to afford printing his resume, now soaked, wrinkled, forgotten. Amelia didn't find out until weeks later. Her assistant mentioned a company trying to call Noah after he ghosted them, and when she confronted him, he just smiled faintly and said, "You needed help. That's all I saw." That silence haunted her. He didn't help her for recognition or reward. He helped because it was right, even when it cost him the one thing he desperately needed. The world had taught Amelia that every gesture had a motive, but Noah shattered that belief. He gave and vanished, like a guardian with no face. It broke something open inside her. How could someone who had so little give so much, so quietly? She began noticing the smaller things he never said, how he never asked for raises, how he stayed late, how he covered others' shifts when they were sick, how he showed up early just to clean the lobby, quietly picking up trash no one else saw. When a co-worker's mother passed away, it was Noah who arranged the flowers. When the coffee machine broke, it was Noah who repaired it. He didn't wait to be told. He just gave, again and again, without applause. Amelia watched from her glass office in awe, sometimes with tears she wiped before anyone noticed. She had millions. He had nothing. But his spirit, his unspoken love for the world, was priceless, and she realized something terrifying and beautiful. He was making her a better human. So, she made her own quiet sacrifice. She turned down 3 investor meetings to build a mentorship program for underprivileged youth. She named it the Ellis Initiative, but never told Noah why. It was her way of giving back the way he had. Silently, selflessly, with heart. Because sometimes, the loudest love is the one that doesn't need to be heard. And in Noah's silence, Amelia heard the most powerful lesson of all. The day Noah saw Amelia collapse at work from exhaustion, something shifted inside him. She had always walked like thunder, unshakable, unstoppable. But that day, She looked human, pale, trembling, fighting battles no one else could see. He stayed by her side, refusing to leave even after she insisted. He made her soup, found her meds, sat through the night in a chair beside her hospital bed. When she woke up, his voice was the first thing she heard. "I'm not letting anything happen to you." From that moment, he became more than just an employee. He was her shield, silently guarding her in meetings where others tried to manipulate her kindness. When board members whispered that she was too emotional to lead, Noah stared them, down with fire in his eyes. "You don't get to say that," he told them. "You weren't there when she rebuilt this company from nothing." They backed off, not because of his title, but because of the conviction in his voice. He wasn't speaking as a worker. He was speaking as someone who would protect her with everything he had. Noah saw the pressure building on her. Investors, circling like vultures, old enemies returning in disguise. So, he did what no one expected. He studied her contracts, learned corporate law on his own, and showed up prepared in every room she entered. She didn't even know half the storms he blocked. From reaching her, emails filtered, lies intercepted, false stories buried before they spread. He had become her wall, quiet, sturdy, unwavering. And when her ex tried to return with false apologies and legal threats, Noah was the one who stepped forward. "He hurt you once," he said, jaw tight. "I won't let him do it again, not even near you." Amelia looked at him, her eyes wide, not in fear, but in something deeper. Trust, maybe even love. He never claimed to be a hero. He just couldn't bear the thought of her being alone in the storm. So he stood there, between her and the world, not with fists, but with fierce loyalty and silent strength. And the more she watched him, the more she realized. No one had ever fought for her like this. Not even family, not even herself. In Noah's eyes, she wasn't just a CEO. She was someone worth protecting, simply because she existed. When Amelia's face paled and her breath became shallow, Noah's heart clenched in a way he hadn't felt in years. She collapsed at work, in the middle of a high-pressure meeting with no one around her noticing. The sharp sound of her body hitting the floor echoed through his mind, freezing him for a second. Without thinking, he rushed to her side, kneeling down on the cold floor as she lay unconscious. His hands trembled, not out of fear, but from the overwhelming instinct to protect her. He knew he had to be strong, but inside he was terrified. When Saidi, the paramedics, arrived, Noah's determination didn't waver. He wasn't just a worker. He wasn't just a bystander. He was her anchor in that moment. He refused to leave her side as the doctors checked her over, insisting she stay under their care. "She's my responsibility," he told them firmly. "I'm staying with her." He watched over her through the night. Despite how exhausted he was, he'd known what it meant to suffer alone. But Amelia had always carried herself as someone who didn't need help. But now she was vulnerable, fragile, and Noah couldn't bear the thought of leaving her to face this alone. The next day, when Amelia woke up, the hospital lights were bright, and her head was pounding, but the first thing she saw was Noah, sitting beside her, holding her hand, his eyes full of quiet worry. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're safe now." She blinked in confusion, still weak, but the comfort in his words cut through the haze. No one had ever stayed like this for her. No one had ever cared enough to simply be there without expectations, without asking for anything in return. As she lay there recovering, Noah became more than just a co-worker. He became her protector, and she didn't even have to ask for it. He made her breakfast every morning, bringing her tea with just the right amount of honey. He arranged her schedule, so she wouldn't overexert herself. He became the constant guard, watching over her meetings, running errands she never had the time for. When he noticed that the board members started whispering about her, questioning her ability to run the company, Noah grew more determined. He knew how they spoke behind her back, how they thought she was just a pretty face in a corporate world that was cold and unforgiving. But Noah wasn't just another yes man. He was fiercely loyal to her, and he would make sure they knew it. During a tense board meeting, Noah stood up from the back of the room and interrupted a cruel remark about Amelia. "If you think you can break her, you've got another thing coming," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. The room fell silent. Amelia was taken aback, but her eyes softened, her chest tightening as Noah's words resonated through her. He didn't care if it cost him his job. He didn't care if it was risky to challenge the power players. Amelia needed to know that someone was in her corner, that someone believed in her even when everyone else doubted her, and he would fight for her, no matter what. When Amelia's ex-husband showed up at the office one afternoon, Noah could feel the tension before the man even entered the building. Amelia had tried to be polite, but Noah could see it in her eyes. She wasn't ready to face him. She wasn't ready for the emotional strain he would bring. Without a word, Noah stepped between them, standing tall like an unmovable wall. "Leave," Noah said, his voice low but menacing. "You're not welcome here." Amelia glanced up at him, her eyes filled with surprise but also something else, relief. She didn't have to be the one to fight this battle. Noah was already doing it for her. Noah's protective instinct had grown beyond anything he had ever expected. It wasn't just about the job, it was about Amelia's peace of mind, her safety, her heart. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, was fueled by the desire to make sure she would never have to face the darkness alone. As the days passed, Noah became the constant in her life. He knew when she was overworked, when she was on the brink of burning out, and he'd be there, quietly, steadily, ensuring that she didn't fall apart. When the pressure from the board came again, Noah was the one who handled the emails, the threats, the demands. He shielded her from the weight of the world so that she could focus on what mattered. He watched her from a distance. It was enough for him that she was thriving, that the storm clouds over her head were finally beginning to clear. But then, one late evening, Amelia called him into her office. Her eyes were tired, but there was something different in the way she looked at him. Something softer. "I know you've been doing more than your job," she said, her voice quiet. "You've been protecting me, fighting my battles without me asking." Noah didn't know what to say. He just stood there, a lump forming in his throat. "I don't know how to thank you," she continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've saved me in ways I'll never be able to repay." That was when Noah knew. He hadn't just become her protector. He had become someone she trusted more than anyone in her life. And in that moment, the connection between them deepened, beyond the boundaries of work. Noah realized that his loyalty, his protection, had never been about a job. It had always been about her, and he would continue to stand by her side no matter what. As the weeks went on, the weight of Noah's sacrifice began to take a silent toll on him. He hadn't asked for anything in return for protecting Amelia, for putting her first in everything. But deep inside, he felt a growing ache, a pang of regret that he couldn't shake off. He had always been the type to give without hesitation, to protect without asking for a reward. But as Amelia's life grew more complex with every new business challenge, he realized something. He had begun to lose pieces of himself. In the process, pieces he hadn't even realized were slipping away until it was too late. One night, after a particularly grueling day of endless meetings and late-night calls, Noah stood outside Amelia's office. He watched her work tirelessly, her head bent over spreadsheets, her mind consumed with decisions that weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was still the same woman who had once been so independent, so self-sufficient. But now she was leaning on him in ways he hadn't anticipated. A sudden feeling of regret washed over him. Why had he allowed himself to become so consumed by her world? Had he lost sight of his own dreams? Had he given up too much of himself to protect her? Noah turned away from her door, unable to shake the guilt gnawing at his heart. It wasn't that he regretted helping her. It was that he felt like he was losing himself in the process. His own aspirations, his own goals, seemed distant now. He had buried them under layers of protection, responsibility, and sacrifice. And while Amelia was thriving, he felt more and more invisible. The next day, things took an unexpected turn. Noah received a call from an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. It was an offer, a big one. A chance to work with a startup that could change his life, give him the recognition and success he had once dreamed of. It felt like the universe was offering him a way out, a path to reclaim what he had lost. But as Noah stood on the precipice of this new opportunity, he felt the weight of his loyalty to Amelia. Leaving her now after everything he had done for her felt like betrayal. But staying, sacrificing his own future for the sake of someone else, felt like a quiet surrender to the life he didn't want anymore. Noah went to Amelia's office hoping to talk things through. But when he walked in, she was already facing a storm of her own. The latest round of hostile board members had escalated, and it looked like she was about to lose everything she had worked so hard to build. Amelia's face was pale, her hands shaking as she reviewed the legal documents in front of her. Without thinking, Noah stepped forward. He didn't even need to ask what was wrong. His instinct kicked in, and he took the documents from her, his mind working to figure out the best course of action. His gaze met hers, and for the first time in weeks, he saw the same vulnerable look in her eyes that she had worn when he first started protecting her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice steady despite the turbulence in his heart. And in that moment, Noah realized that he hadn't just been protecting her. He had been protecting himself, too. By helping her fight, he had found a purpose again, a reason to stand up, to push forward. But the moment of clarity didn't last long. Later that night, as he lay in bed, Noah's mind raced, his own desires, his own dreams. The life he had once wanted flashed before his eyes. He couldn't keep ignoring them. He couldn't keep burying them in the name of selflessness. The next morning, Amelia walked into work to find Noah missing. He had left a note, a simple one, explaining that he needed to step away, that he needed to find his own path. Amelia's heart sank. She had always known Noah was more than just her protector, but she never realized how deeply his own sacrifice ran. Noah's departure was a shock to everyone, but it was a necessary one. He had to find his own redemption, his own way, but Amelia, in her own way, understood. She knew that she had been so focused on saving her company, on surviving, that she had failed to see the man standing beside her. Days turned into weeks, and the space between them began to feel like a gaping wound. Amelia was more successful than ever, her company soaring to new heights. But something was missing. Noah's absence echoed in her every decision, in every victory. She realized that he had been more than just a shield. He had been her foundation. Meanwhile, Noah began his new journey, but it wasn't the easy road he had expected. He poured himself into the startup, into the work that once held so much promise. But deep down, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. He had reclaimed his independence. But at what cost? He had run from the very thing he had fought so hard to protect, his connection to Amelia. One evening, months later, Amelia called him. Her voice was softer than he remembered, but still strong. "I need you," she said simply. "Not just as an employee, but as the person who always believed in me, the person who made me better." Noah felt a shift in his heart. He had always known he would come back to her, but he didn't expect her to reach out first. "I'm ready," he said, "for both of us." And so, Noah's redemption wasn't just about reclaiming his own dreams. It was about realizing that his journey with Amelia was never truly over. They would build together side by side, not out of obligation, but out of mutual respect, love, and understanding. Noah had found his purpose, not by leaving, but by returning, stronger than ever. Months had passed since Noah and Amelia's paths had diverged. Both had found success in their own ways. Noah in his startup, Amelia in her empire. But despite the achievements, something crucial was missing. The connection that had once bound them. One evening, Amelia was at the peak of her stress. Her company was on the brink of a major merger with a global tech giant, a deal that could secure her place in history. But there was a catch. The deal was facing opposition from several powerful board members who had their own agendas. Amelia's team was fracturing under the pressure, and her instincts told her this was no ordinary challenge. Something felt off. There was a deeper conspiracy brewing, one that could tear her company apart. At the same time, Noah was facing an unexpected twist in his own journey. His new startup was thriving, but the tech world was cutthroat. He had come so far, but now, a rival company, one with connections to Amelia's adversaries, was moving in on his business. Noah's loyalty to Amelia, his desire to see her succeed, was tugging at him. But he knew he had to act fast, or he'd lose everything he'd worked. For Amelia, feeling the weight of the conspiracy closing in around her, reached out to Noah. Her voice on the phone was filled with desperation, though she tried to mask it with strength. "I need your help, Noah," she said, her words heavy with both vulnerability and resolve. "I'm losing control of this deal, and I think someone on the inside is working against me." Noah could hear the anxiety in her tone, and he knew this was a pivotal moment. His heart was torn. He had his own business to protect, his own future to secure. But he also knew he couldn't turn his back on her now. Without hesitation, Noah agreed to help. He didn't ask for a reward. He didn't need one. This was more than just a business deal for him. It was about redemption, about proving to himself that he hadn't given up on his own dreams by helping Amelia fulfill hers. The suspense of the situation hung in the air, as both of them, on separate fronts, worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. As they pieced together the fragments of the conspiracy, the tension between them grew palpable. Noah had his own resources now, his own team, but every step he took to protect Amelia's empire felt like he was stepping into uncharted territory. He was no longer just a helper. He was a force in the business world, a player in the game that had once been far beyond his reach. And with each revelation, he realized just how deeply the stakes had become. Amelia, too, was facing a personal battle. The more she uncovered about the backstabbing at the highest levels of her company, the more she realized that she couldn't trust anyone, not even the people closest to her. Her vulnerability, the very thing she had tried to protect all these years, had been exploited by the... At the climax of the situation, with both Noah and Amelia nearing the final piece of the puzzle, the tension reached its peak. The enemy's plan was about to unfold, and time was running out. Noah, against all odds, managed to gather critical evidence that could expose the traitors within Amelia's company. But just as he was about to share it, he faced a choice that could alter everything. The rival tech company, the one that had been encroaching on his business, had made an offer to buy him out. An offer that would secure his future in ways he had never imagined, but it came at a cost. In exchange for the buyout, he would have to walk away from his alliance with Amelia, abandoning her at the moment of her greatest need. Noah stood at the crossroads of his life. Would he sell out for the success that had always eluded him, or would he take a stand for what he believed in, his bond with Amelia, and the future they could build together? The suspense was suffocating, the clock ticking down as he weighed his options. Amelia was fighting for everything she had worked for. But was he ready to give up his own dreams in the name of loyalty? And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this very moment, Amelia made the first move. She stepped into the boardroom where the final negotiation was taking place, ready to face the board members who had plotted against her. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone was enough to silence the room, to make even the most powerful players reconsider their stance. Noah, watching from the sidelines, realized that the decision had already been made for him. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about success or failure. It was about doing what was right, about standing beside the person who had always believed in him, even when he had doubted himself. The moment the truth came to light, when the conspirators were exposed, when the merger was secured, Noah's heart swelled with pride, not for the victory itself, but for the journey they had taken together. The suspense had been unbearable, but it had led them to this moment of clarity, of triumph over adversity. And, in that moment, as Amelia looked at him with gratitude and respect, Noah knew that his life had changed forever. He had found his purpose, not through fame or fortune, but through the people he helped, the battles he fought, and the love he had rediscovered. This wasn't just a business victory. It was a personal redemption. And it had been worth every moment of suspense, every difficult choice, every sacrifice. As the dust settled from the chaos of the last few weeks, the weight of what Noah and Amelia had been through slowly began to lift. The merger had gone through successfully, and Amelia's company was not only back on track, but now positioned to take the industry by storm. Her board had been reshuffled, her enemies defeated, and she was finally in control of her empire once more. But it wasn't just business that had been transformed. Her personal life had undergone a shift, too, a change that was more meaningful than any merger or business deal. Noah stood beside her, a partner not just in the world of business, but in the deeper, more profound journey of life. The decision he had made to stand by her, to help her through the most difficult time in her career, had cemented his place in her life. And though the tech industry was still ruthless and competitive, Noah had learned a valuable lesson. Success wasn't just about the money or the accolades. It was about the people you chose to surround yourself with, the values you held on to when times got tough, and the connections you built that went beyond mere transactions. 4. Noah, the journey had been about redemption. He had gone from a boy who missed his big opportunity to a man who had transformed his life by helping the right person at the right time. And in doing so, he had found something that no business deal could ever offer: peace. He didn't need the fame or fortune that had once seemed so important. He had the respect of the people who mattered, and he had found his true purpose in helping others rise. He had discovered that by being loyal to his values and his friends, he had built a future that was worth far more than any amount of success could offer. As for Amelia, she looked at Noah differently now, not just as a helper or a colleague, but as an equal, a partner, a person who had been there for her when everyone else had failed. Her empire was stronger than ever, But the real strength she had gained was in the relationships she had nurtured. She had learned to trust again, to open herself up to others, and to accept that true power didn't come from controlling everything, but from surrounding yourself with the right people. Noah had become that person for her, and it was clear that they both had a bright future ahead, not just in business, but in life. In the final scene, Noah and Amelia stood at the top of the building that now housed the headquarters of their newly reformed company. The skyline stretched out before them, a symbol of everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed. But in that moment, they realized that it wasn't just the success that mattered, it was the journey, the late nights, the struggles, the doubts, and the triumphs. Everything had led them here, to this moment of clarity, where they both understood that the road ahead would not be easy, but it would be worth it. Amelia turned to Noah, her eyes filled with gratitude and hope. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for believing in me when no one else did, for standing by me, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart." Noah smiled, a quiet, humble smile. "It wasn't just me, Amelia. We both made it through this, together." The world below them continued its usual bustle, the city, moving at a relentless pace. But for Noah and Amelia, time had slowed down. They stood together, knowing that no matter what the future held, they had each other. They had been through the worst, and now they were ready to face the best. Their story was only just beginning. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, Amelia reached for Noah's hand, and in that small, simple gesture, both of them knew that the clarity they had sought was no longer a distant dream. It was their reality. They had found hope, not in their success, but in the people they had become and the lives they had touched along the way. And with that hope, they stepped into the future, ready for whatever challenges or triumphs it might bring. They had found each other in the chaos, and now they were ready to build something even greater, together.